The Dalai Lama once said that if every 8-year-old is taught meditation, we'll eliminate violence from the world in 1 generation. So today, that's the topic that we'll be discussing. We'll talk about whether this could be true, that violence could be eliminated from the world if we teach mindfulness to children. And we're going to talk generally about the benefits of teaching mindfulness to young people. So today, I'm joined by Dr. Heather Grace Bond, who is a counsellor and mindfulness and compassion teacher, and she works with both children and adults. She's the author of the book Awakening Child, A Journey of Inner Transformation Through Teaching Your Child Mindfulness and Compassion. And she holds a PhD in education from the University of Aberdeen. And as part of that PhD, she created a mindfulness and compassion course for young people for the Mindfulness Association. And this course is now freely available on the Medito app. Heather's also an associate tutor for the Mindfulness Association, and she's a mum and stepmom to 5 tweens and teens. So welcome, Heather. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
So let's jump in and start to get to know you a bit more. So I know in your book, you mentioned that you used to be a software engineer. So could you explain a bit about your journey from software engineer to counsellor and mindfulness teacher?
Yes, I will try to do that without boring the socks off you. I think that really I went into software engineering because of a fear of people. And computers were just so predictable, 1s and 0s, black and white. I just knew where I was. And I think it was really when everything fell apart. My husband had an affair, and I just, life as I knew it wasn't there anymore. And that ultimately I look at that as a real gift now. We're still friends. We didn't manage to make the relationship work, but that pain ultimately has been really transformed into something quite wonderful. So as a way of kind of coping with the mayhem of what was going on in my life, I just looked to reach out and find something kind of nurturing. And I happened across this wonderful lady called Lorraine Murray, who was running an Indian head massage and meditation course. So I thought, well, I'll do that after work. And it was the start of a complete transformation. And I went along to what she was teaching because I thought, well, Indian head massage, that sounds lovely if we're just practicing that. But actually it was the meditation. It was her attitude of kind of warmth and curiosity. And I got this real sense when I went along to her course of just this kind of inner okayness. And that's what I really, really longed for and still do long for. And mindfulness and compassion gives me a lot of that. So it wasn't long before my software engineering career kind of fell away as I realized that I needed to check in with what I really wanted to do in terms of my life path. And I suddenly found people less frightening, and the connection with people was suddenly kind of rich and wonderful and still scary, but worth kind of rolling my sleeves up and getting stuck in and living life rather than kind of hiding from it in a way. So
amazing. So yeah, it sounds like a real personal journey of growth, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how did you find balancing that, that new practice and maintaining a meditation practice and I guess learning about the world of mindfulness? How did you balance that with your family and your children?
Family life, I think it's always been incredibly difficult, and there's no kind of easy way with it. I think as mums, even if we're not trying to fit in mindfulness practice, we're trying to still fit in all sorts of things and trying not to lose ourselves to a degree. I think I really lost myself. I was just a wife and a mum for many years, and almost the falling apart of the marriage then made me kind of look at well, who am I? Who is Heather? And I just had no idea. And so, yeah, it was really, really tricky to just, it almost felt like stealing moments to try and have a practice. And I think inevitably feelings of guilt if I was to try and sort of sneak away. I had this little meditation room in the house, and it was tiny, but it felt like my little kind of cave, my sanctuary. But my children would find me there and, you know, kind of, yeah, almost heap upon top of me while I was just trying to have a quiet moment. And then that kind of became the practice, I think. And it changed from feeling like almost my practice had been spoilt if somebody came looking for me and, you know, Mum, where's my socks? I can't find them. And, oh, my practice has been ruined. Really changed to just aware of the feelings coming up for me, mindfully speaking, and then I'm going to say returning to practice, although over time it didn't feel like there was much distinction. It wasn't like practice and non-practice. It's really felt much more like mindfulness has just become life. It's not so separate anymore.
Yeah, and I guess that's the important thing for people to understand is that mindfulness isn't just sitting with your eyes closed. And if you can find a moment of peace with your eyes closed, sat on a meditation mat, then it's not hugely beneficial to your wider life if then you can't carry that forward into your life, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess having your children coming in, jumping in on you, I guess that it was almost an aid to practice because you had to get used to the interruption and
Exactly.
the manic life that we all lead.
Yes, exactly. And it reminds me of when I first learned mindfulness, taught by the most amazing lady, Chloe Homewood Allen, who was a tutor with the Mindfulness Association and who sadly passed recently. But I learned mindfulness as she taught it in this room in Mary Hill that was really on this incredibly busy road. And I remember sitting there, this was over 10 years ago now, with sirens wailing, and, you know, I would close my eyes and feel like I was about to get run over by, you know, an ambulance or a fire engine or something. And my initial response was like, this is the most ridiculous place to learn meditation. What is going on here? And then over the weeks, I realized it was the perfect place to learn meditation because it was life. And I was kind of, in a way, trying to escape from it rather than learn to live it.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the practices that's taught by the Mindfulness Association and included in the course that you created as well is the settling, grounding, resting, support. And the support element can be anything that grounds you or anchors you to the present moment, right? So including sounds. So if you're in a place with lots of sound, then it's the perfect opportunity to anchor yourself to the present moment using that sound, right?
Exactly. And I think that often we think with sound support, oh, well, we want nice sounds like running water and the birds chirping in the trees. And yeah, sure, those are lovely, but also to see our reaction to sounds that we don't like so much, there's such rich stuff in there. So yeah, and the Mindfulness Association places this real emphasis on preference and how that kind of drives that kind of clinging to stuff that we like, just tuning out of stuff that doesn't interest us, and then pushing away things we don't like. So yeah, and sound for me has been the perfect support because I think naturally I'm quite a control freak. So I can't control the sounds around me too much.
Yeah. Great. Well, let's return to the quote that I read out at the beginning. So from the Dalai Lama, who said that if we taught mindfulness and meditation to every 8-year-old child, then we could eliminate violence from the world. So what do you take from that? What do you think he means? Do you think it's possible that we could eliminate violence?
Yeah. Oh, do you know, I've been reflecting on this a lot recently in light of world events. And I guess it kind of takes me to a place of wondering about how we really know anything. But I think deep down, there's some part of me that does know that that's true, or it feels true. And I think that it can be quite easy to look at acts of horror and violence and to feel like it's very much not us, and to abhor it naturally, and to feel terrified, angry, or the whole host of emotions. But I think if we're really honest with ourselves and we look kind of deep inside, that all of this exists within us, and only by this really courageous inner work can we hope to change what we see outside of us. I definitely really see the outer world as a reflection of the inner, and I think that there's much work to be done, but my goodness, yeah, I'm trying to check in with how best to kind of express something that feels so kind of alive and passionate within me. I think having seen the changes in young people who do have the opportunity to explore their inner world with a sense of kind of curiosity and warmth and acceptance, that I've experienced the radical transformation for myself. I've seen it in young people, and yes, yeah, I think it could almost, yeah, the word evolution really kind of springs to mind. It seems like it's an essential part of human evolution if we're ever to go beyond of the kind of reptilian sort of, fight, flight, reproduce, feed. If we, to get beyond that, yeah, we have to do the inner work to transcend.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you mentioned the work that you've done with young people and you've noticed that transformation. So what other kind of benefits do you see that they take away from that?
Yeah, gosh, it's really hard to kind of bring all that together, because it's just, I've seen change in every aspect of young people's lives, from the really practical issue of just getting a good night's sleep, which, the more I work with young people and see so much anxiety around, that sleep can be an early casualty in all of this. And so the benefits from sleeping better to better relationships, to actually, I find myself wanting to say a bit more about the better relationships, because there's something about, if we can understand our own feelings and our own needs better, we're in a much better place to understand what might be going on for somebody else. And that kind of theory of mind is, I think, pretty crucial as young people grow up, that ability to take another person's perspective. Much conflict arises from that. I guess that if I really distill it down, what I see in the counselling room with young people and adults alike is this real wish to avoid what's painful. And so much of our suffering, and the suffering we inflict on others, seems to come from that wish to avoid what's painful for us. And so pretty much every aspect of life, I think, can be improved and made better by being willing to kind of open up a little bit to what's uncomfortable, and really bring some warmth and curiosity and acceptance to those inner experiences. And it transforms so many aspects of life. Relationships with friends, relationships with parents, the physical health. I've really noticed that so many young people get headaches and skin troubles, all that kind of stuff. The sense of energy that can return sometimes with anxiety and low mood. We can either be quite high in energy or really, really low. And mindfulness seems to really make a difference in that as well. I could Yeah, I could talk all day about this, and
Yeah.
I don't really know. There's so much. I don't really know how to summarize.
Yeah, but I think you mentioned the anxiety amongst young people, and I think that is getting worse, or it has got worse over the past, say, 10 years, largely due to social media and constantly being stuck to these screens and like infinite scrolling. So, and I guess mindfulness helps to come away from that. I guess being stuck to a screen all day is almost like the opposite of being mindfulness in a way. So
yes, yeah, and I think that's a really important aspect of it, the kind of the use of technology and that kind of the doom scrolling and the I think it's probably unrealistic, although there's a large part of me that would love to just kind of ban mobile phones from schools, etc. I mean, it's not practical, it's not realistic, but can we at least sort of encourage more mindful use of technology, just be really so much more aware of the impacts that it has, and making a small change such as curating a feed. I'm aware young people don't tend to use Facebook anymore, but maybe TikTok or Instagram or whatever, just a little bit of curating the feed from a more negative to something more maybe inspiring, that little changes like that, and being much more aware of our intention when we're using these tools that are supposed to improve our lives, but without mindfulness, I think can really do the opposite.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The technology has the potential to do amazing things, but left uncontrolled, especially I guess in a world of commercialization, then it can definitely go in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. And somehow online life seems to feed worst instincts, that we don't seem to censor ourselves in a way that we would, that some of the things that are said in social media that we wouldn't dream of saying to each other face to face.
Exactly.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah. So I think going back to teaching mindfulness to children, what difficulties have you had in doing this? Is there any resistance sometimes to these kinds of teachings, or do you have any particular struggles?
Would you like me to focus on with my own children or in schools, or because there's a real difference?
Okay, let's start with your children then, and maybe move on to schools.
So what I've noticed with my own children is the less evangelical I've become about it, that the more I'm just sort of steadying myself and really trusting in my own practice and my own embodiment of these values of warmth, curiosity, acceptance, kindness, patience, etc. That has made them a little bit more receptive. And that when I first learned mindfulness, there was that kind of, this is amazing, you guys have got to learn this is going to be great. That there was that thing that I think we do as teens, which is, I think for adolescents forging their own identities, that if we're then pushing something on them, there's going to be this real pushback. So where there's been greater success, in inverted commas, what does success mean? But I've really noticed, because my youngest, who's 12, and there's a 9-year age gap between him and my middle son, mindfulness was just a part of his life from when he was teeny weeny. And so whilst his older brothers would kind of burst in on me in the meditation room, he would just kind of crawl up the stairs and get under my meditation blanket with me and sit on the meditation cushion with me. And then he would kind of trace shapes on my hand, for example, while I was practicing, which is the most amazing mindfulness support.
Yeah, definitely.
And he still listens at 12. He still listens to the meditations that I recorded as an album for him when he was 4.
Wow.
So he's kind of taken to heart. With the older children, I see it more as kind of planting seeds. And I think they're still in kind of, you know, late teens and early 20s, still in that it's not cool to kind of talk to mum about the thing that is her thing, but
Yeah.
I can see in their values that they've kind of taken on some of this stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So then how about in schools then? How does it differ?
Yeah, I think in schools, well, for my PhD, I suppose I took advantage of the fact that you have a captive audience and that what I was teaching was to all of the pupils in the PSE, so personal and social education. The schools gave me that class to teach the mindfulness stuff. And if parents objected, they could take the kids out. That was fine. But I think there was only one pupil that happened with, and the other 200, you know, they were just there because that was what school told them was happening. And in the interviews afterwards, it was interesting because some young people said, I'm kind of glad I wasn't given the choice whether to attend or not, because I probably would have chosen not to, but I'm really glad that I was there because actually I got an awful lot out of it. So what I chose to do in the teaching, which felt and continues to feel really important, was to offer choice, not in the do you want to be here or not, but do you want to engage in practice or not? Only you can judge where you're at. If you feel a little bit overwhelmed by whatever's going on in your life right now, by all means take these colouring sheets and colouring pens, and you know, maybe while I'm delivering the practice, you could just like notice the weight of the crayon in your hand and notice the temperature of it, and you could maybe notice some of those sounds around and still be present, but perhaps not quite so up close and personal with these difficult feelings that you might be experiencing. And what was also interesting in terms of receptivity was that the younger age group, the S1s and S2s, were much more open, at least ostensibly, to what was going on. And the older kids would kind of, you know, I would walk into the classroom and arms were crossed and there was this real look of suspicion. And in interviews, they would talk about moments that had touched them, the ideas. I think I read out the Two Wolves story that really touched quite a few of them, and they would tell me about that in the interview, but said I couldn't show that anything you were saying was kind of touching me because that wouldn't have been cool in the class. So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting journey.
Yeah. So then, based on that, would you have any advice for teachers or parents for if they wanted to teach mindfulness to kids?
Yeah, I think for parents, my key advice would be just start as young as you can, and for parents and teachers alike, really work on yourself first and kind of really engage in some good quality training if you can, get a good mindfulness course under your belt, and then practice in whatever way you can fit into your life, but really try and embody what you aim to teach, because children really can smell that stinky whiff of do as I say, not as I do. And then for parents of young children, what I found was and still is really natural actually with my youngest, is to just bring mindfulness into just daily moments. And so if we're bored, if you know my youngest and I are waiting for something to happen, then we'll play the kind of noticing game, which is, you know, oh, I notice there's a raindrop sliding down the window of the car right now, and I can see that lamppost reflected in it. And then he'll come in and say the thing that he can notice, and we're kind of aiming to notice the things that other people might not notice. And there's a real kind of joy in it and a lightness. And in terms of doing practice together, I think, you know, yeah, again, for parents, the kind of moments of that naturally arise, I think with young kids, they're so naturally in the present moment that, I could have in my practice said to my youngest, stop drawing on my hand, I'm practicing. But recognizing that was a moment of connection and mindfulness, because we were both very with those physical sensations. And for teachers, again, that embodiment, the embodiment of what you aim to teach, and then try to make it really relevant. I think that's really been the way in. Relevant. If you can really understand a young person's life, then you may recognize that the moments they feel most anxious are the moments they're scrolling through Instagram and having a moment of fear that their eyebrows don't look quite how the latest trend is going, for example. Problems with friends and fallings out. And if we can make it relevant, then we can kind of feed that natural motivation to learn something that's really helpful. So sharing from an authentic place.
So I guess we're talking about how teachers can teach mindfulness to kids, but I guess a lot of that must be controlled to some extent by what the school allows, I guess. So we recently had an interview with a head teacher on our blog, and it was a school in Wales, and they've really implemented an element of mindfulness to across their curriculum. And I'm guessing that is kind of down to the head teacher to decide to implement that. There certainly wasn't anything like that when I was in school. I'm not sure how much it's changed. How have you seen that? Have you seen a development over the past few years, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've written about this quite a bit in my PhD thesis, and I guess my understanding of the kind of landscape of mindfulness in schools is that really primary schools are set up so much better to integrate mindfulness because the class teacher is with that class for the whole of the year. So there's a real opportunity to have a mindful minute at the start of the day, to come back after lunch and kind of gather again and kind of recognize the energy of playtime is very much kind of up there, and then to come back and to focus. And in secondary schools, it's just a completely different ball game. And I need to be careful not to kind of get on my soapbox and kind of bemoan the state of secondary education, but having worked in a number of different secondary schools, not just teaching mindfulness, but working as a school counsellor, it feels a little bit like a kind of a factory to sort of very much set up for the kind of industrial era of, just getting kids a certain kind of a minimum education. And teachers are so stressed and feel so overworked and underpaid and undervalued and underappreciated. Many kids are just wrestling with levels of anxiety that make learning almost impossible. And then the teachers are, trying to meet that and do what they can in the classroom. So, and the kids are just, hustling and bustling around in between these lessons. So I have a sense that there in primary schools is more space in which to place mindfulness, and that I've seen there's plenty of interest, I think, in secondary schools, but then it's so difficult to implement and across the board kind of this is how the school is going to be. It's going to embed mindfulness into its whole ethos and system, because they're just so huge, so huge compared to the primary schools. And you, as you say, you need a head teacher who's really invested in it. And I think my understanding is that head teachers of primary schools seem to have quite a bit more autonomy than do in secondary schools as well, in terms of how schools are set up.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I realise we're coming towards the end of our time now, but there's one more question that I just wanted to get in here at the end. So the Mindfulness Association, similarly to Medito Foundation, places importance on compassion as well as just, it's not purely mindfulness. It's kind of like mindfulness combined with compassion.
Absolutely.
So what do you, what's the reason behind that from like the Mindfulness Association perspective, and how have you experienced practicing compassion with mindfulness?
Yeah. So I think a number of teachers suggest that mindfulness and compassion are like the two wings of the bird. And I think that for me, that just seems like a perfect analogy, because it's a very lopsided bird if it's only got one wing that's functioning. And it's, just from a therapeutic point of view, if I really, because I guess counselling is just much more of my life at the moment than anything else. What I see kind of every day is how difficult it is for people to really look inside and notice the habits and patterns that are driving them, because it's too scary. It's really painful to look inside and not like what you see. And so the compassion element is just vital, absolutely vital, because then it's like kind of step by step, there's something that we may not like, that we don't have the courage to face, but the compassion comes in. There's this kind of gentleness, this acceptance. Oh, okay, this is how I am. I can see this more clearly now because of this softer light, rather than this really harsh light of interrogation. And so when we can see more clearly, then we can move forward and there's choice. So I'm aware I'm speaking in slightly abstract terms, but I have felt this so much in my own practice, and that the compassion is what enables change, what enables us to see what's really there. Because harsh light, we retreat from, it's too scary. So,
Yeah, I've had a similar experience with, so you mentioned earlier as well about part of mindfulness is kind of accepting without judgment what's going on. So, and if your mind is full of wandering thoughts, I think sometimes it can be easy to get frustrated at yourself, and not be just accepting of the wandering thoughts, or the anxieties, or whatever it is. But when purposely trying to foster that self-compassion really does help, and it makes a difference, because you can have a logical thought of, yeah, I'm going to accept whatever comes, but when you approach it almost as if you're like, the way you would be compassionate towards somebody else, like a loved one, you would never tell somebody, oh, you're stupid, why are you doing this way, why is your mind wandering? But you might say that to yourself. And if you come at it in a way that you're compassionate to yourself in the same way that you'd be compassionate to others, then it really makes a difference to the practice, and it makes that acceptance of what's going on a lot more authentic, in my experience.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's maybe important just to kind of reiterate, because acceptance is a difficult term, I think, for people to really get their heads around. And I think often people think, oh, I have to accept what's happening to me. So I think it's really important to clarify, we're talking about accepting inner experience, so the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, whatever's going on inside. But yes, that acceptance feels more authentic, is more in alignment with, if we value speaking, as you say, if we value speaking to a friend kindly when they're suffering, why on earth would we see it as okay to kind of be really mean to ourselves when we're struggling? But so many of us do. We kind of internalize that voice of a critical parent, or whoever was kind of hardest on us, and think that's the best way to kind of encourage ourselves, as if we'll lay like broccoli if we don't have that harsh voice of just crack on, stop being such a wimp. And so that the compassion is feels totally kind of interwoven with that acceptance. And it's an acceptance doesn't mean that we don't want to change. It's almost a prerequisite for change. When I fully accept myself as I am, only then am I free to change. So I can really see. If I can't really see what's going on, then I don't, how can I make a choice about what I want, how I want to move forward?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think starting with self-compassion as well, that in a way it enables us to be more compassionate to others as well. And I always like to quote RuPaul here, who says, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else?
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think it is a bit counterintuitive, or countering the messages that some of us have received. I think that I know growing up, that particularly from my grandparents, it was very much focus on others and don't be selfish by thinking of yourself, and very much be compassionate to others, but really that each of us should be at the back of the queue in terms of when we're doling out the compassion. But yet when we're kind of lacking, that lack this comes back to the kind of inner world projecting onto the outer world, that if we're lacking in compassion for ourselves, then there is something missing in what we bring to the world, I think. So I do see it as like a gift. If we can become more self-compassionate, it's the opposite of selfishness, because I know I'm so much more of a better mom, a better friend, a better everything, how I show up in the world because of that self-compassion.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. Well, I think that's quite a nice note to end on. So thank you very much for taking the time. I really enjoyed talking to you. It's been really interesting.
Thanks so much, Stephen. It's been great talking with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, so for anybody watching, the course that Heather created for young adults through the Mindfulness Association is now available for free on the app. Just go to the pack section and then go to the Mindfulness Association. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it.